Hello, I'm your superhero critic. I'll stay silver as long as you stay awesome, and it's Friday the 13th again!
Yay!
Pamela's Tale is a 2-issue miniseries written by Mark Andrico, sorry if I'm mispronouncing names, and illustrated by Sean Mole, published by Wildstorm Comics. This comic focused heavily on Pamela Voorhees instead of Jason. We learn her backstory before Jason's accident from the first film, tying loose ends with how unstable of a person Pamela actually was.
So this is Friday the 13th, Pamela's Tale, issue number 1. Looking at the cover, we see a pregnant Pamela that is clearly meant to be the centerpiece here, but honestly, all I'm focusing on is the Halloween zombie mask that looks like it's trying to eat her gown with its ear.
You realize it's meant to be Jason's face, right?
I realize that, but given that it looks like a Halloween zombie mask, that's what I'm gonna call it.
That is insulting to disfigured people.
So is this art style.
We open on an introduction that is pretty much copy-pasted from the movie. Not much to talk about just yet.
Except the fact that Annie looks like a brunette Dolly Parton.
Well, more like a mannequin of a brunette Dolly Parton. In fact, mannequin women will be a recurring theme here. In fact, as seen on this frankly terrifying full-page panel of Pamela, terrifying mannequin women would be a pretty good alternative title. All aboard the train to the Uncanny Valley!
Making stops in Noteville and fuck this burg!
Pamela begins to tell her story to Annie as the bulk of the comic is a huge flashback, like most horror and general villains' backstories. It starts with abuse. Pamela's husband is apparently a drunken, abusive asshole, and because every fictional villain has to start with an abusive spouse, parent, or both.
Because no one in real life who has had a good life ever becomes a supervillain. In all seriousness though, villains are scarier when everything is done right and they still go bad. So this is pretty mediocre as far as an origin story goes. I will say though that the way Pam talks about her husband is a sadly accurate representation for a lot of people, as she thinks of him as much better than he really is. She's apparently schizophrenic also, and Auditory Hallucination Baby is offering some surprisingly good advice here. I'm not going to tell you to listen to delusions, because that could end very badly. But if a delusion is telling you to get away from an abusive spouse or partner or what have you, probably do it. Pick a way that's more legal than murder, preferably, but other than that, decent advice.
And that goes beyond just physical abuse. Take it from someone who's dealt with it. Learn to take the signs.
Run, even if it's a delusion telling you to. Probably don't murder.
But murder's all in fun.
Shh. For legal purposes, that was a joke.
We'll see.
Pamela puts an axe through Elias's head, and she, of course, glosses over the murder in her story, referring to his sudden death. She then goes on to say that she has no real money, which is going to make sense in just a couple pages. She then continues to talk to Hallucination Jason as she chops up Elias's body and blows up the trailer.
Who's got time to watch an explosion?
Pamela drives to Crystal Lake and drops Elias's body into the water, and we're back at the present day where she's telling all this to Annie. Annie's asking if Pamela knows what happened at the lake to make the crazy old guy call it cursed. Pamela, of course, says that it's nothing to worry about. They drive past the road leading to Camp Crystal Lake, and Annie points it out worriedly, but Pam assures her it's just a shortcut. Shortcut is, of course, serial killer for, will you shut up while I'm trying to find a good place to murder you?
There's always duct tape for that.
Back to the past, Pamela shows up in the town of Crystal Lake. She and Hallucination Jason are apparently able to afford a house. Even though the realtor says it's haunted, I'm not sure how the whole widow with no money thing is supposed to mesh with I immediately found a house in my price range. She also immediately gets a job in the local diner just by mentioning to the waitress that she needs a job. Is this why there's a disconnect between boomers and millennials on how easy this stuff should be? Is this what they think it's like? Is this what it was like for them? I wouldn't be able to buy a house with the spare change I find in my car and get a job just by walking into a place going, hey, I need a job. You're hired.
It's not how any of this works.
God, I wish it was.
So Pamela's happy with her house and her job when she gets even more good news in the form of a job offer to work summers at Camp Crystal Lake. It's not clear if her shock is at the job offer or that them wanting to work for her so close to the corpse of a murdered husband. Either way, just after she accepts the job, her water breaks and she goes into labor in the most dramatic fashion possible. We then cut to the delivery room and the doctor and nurses are crossing themselves at the sight of the baby she just birthed, ending our first issue.
Honestly, Jason here just looks kind of reminiscent of medieval paintings of babies, because for some reason, 14th century paintings of babies tend to look like old men. Jason doesn't really look deformed here, he just looks like an old man who's lost all of his hair, never worn sunscreen a day in his life, spent the past 70 years chain smoking and getting into bar fights. So, last thoughts here. The art style in this comic's a little wooden and kind of off-putting, which I guess kind of works for a horror comic, but at the same time, meh. And the story overall is just meh. It's predictable and honestly feels a little forced in order to pad out Jason's backstory, just making Pamela an unlikable villain. Like, it's not bad, but it's not good either. It's just kind of there. It exists. It's a thing.
So that was Pamela's Tale issue number 1. We'll probably get to issue 2 down the road in a later season, but for now, we're done with that.
It's just kind of meh.
Boring.
A little bit.
That being said, I'm your superhero critic, and I'll stay super as long as you stay awesome.